Welcome to A Photographer's Life, the channel that takes you behind the curtain into the world of professional architectural photography. Join us now for an episode with some of America's premier architectural photographers. Today's broadcast comes from a recent Zoom meeting of the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This discussion is led by AIAP Director Alan Blakely. We hope you enjoy the show. If you do, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. Now, on with the show.
We want to welcome everyone to this November 2024 meeting of the AIAP. We're talking today about finding new clients and keeping them. And this is something that has been brought to my attention repeatedly, that there's some in the group that are struggling just a little bit. And it's also something that we continually have to consider when we're in business. And so today we want to talk a little bit about where we go to find those new clients and how to gain them and then how to retain them in a long-term relationship. And so welcome to everyone. And we'll just kick this off. And is there anybody that has a secret formula that they'd like to share before we get into the discussion proper?
Yeah, I fight them off with a stick, all those new clients.
We actually had a couple conversations before this meeting went live where that was the case. There's a few that are, they've got more than they can handle and they're turning work away. And that's wonderful. But for those who are not in that position, I think that's what we're hoping to maybe discover some ideas and techniques that might help move their businesses forward. And so let me just start off with it and say that it's changed so much in recent years, or at least over the span of my career, how I find new clients and how I go about maybe getting them to use me and then retaining them. Because initially when I went out, it was with that portfolio under my arm and prints and 4x5 transparencies and a portable light box and getting a meeting with an art director or a marketing director or something like that, and then sitting down and showing the portfolio. And I don't know that too many of us do that anymore. Does anybody here do that anymore? Does that ever happen?
You're bringing back memories. Let me throw this out to everybody.
Yeah.
In the last several years, when I've done a high-profile project for a client, a developer, or the architect, interior designer, I will always ask for a referral letter if they enjoyed what we delivered to them. And most of the times they will give me a nice referral letter, and I immediately will send samples of outtakes from that project along with that referral letter to a competitive developer or architect that's in that same genre. Most of my photography is in hotel hospitality, but more importantly is the multifamily industry, luxury, high-rise and mid-rises. And I'll go to the developer and the architects that do primary that genre of business, and I will send them samples of a work that they wish to be in that particular market or with that particular client. And I always seem to get favorable responses or inquiries about our rates or services, because they know that referral was from a person that's they're familiar with in that industry and marketplace, and that opens up the door. That says, well, as this firm can hire me, this photographer, I'm more acceptable to listen to what and offer them bid proposals for our next project.
Yeah. Now, is that something that's you send out physically? Are those physical prints? And
these days, I'll send them outtakes of PDFs.
Okay.
Of a luxury high-rise or mid-rise project, and I'll send to the architect or developer a referral letter from the architect on that project or the developer from that project, and send it to other people in that industry and to say, here, your competitor has saw our work, has used our services, and that opens up a lot of doors or inquiries into our services for their next project.
So I'm just still want to be clear on the mechanics of it. Is that an email that you put that
I'll
in?
send an email introduction. Just completed a project X, and with the developer and the architect, and here's outtakes for your review. And then they'll look at the PDF, and then they'll also see the attached referral letter.
Richard, on your emails, do you also put a link to your website, and especially that part of your website that relates the most to what you're sending?
Yes. It depends. If I'm going to send a multifamily industry, I'll send them that category. Or if I'm doing hospitality, I will send a project and a referral from the developer, the restaurant, or the hotel organization to another department of that architect or developer that does that similar projects. So, they're seeing apples to apples, not apples and tangerines. They don't want to see healthcare outtakes when they're not in that industry. If there's architects and engineers and construction people or in the healthcare, I will send them healthcare projects and referral letters from that industry. And it was positives. I get a lot more inquiries and follow-ups. We're interested in, can you send me your rates? Can you send me additional work samples? And that opens up the door versus a cold call or a cold email, is that they know that developer, their competitor, they know that other architectural firm that they work with or similar in that industry, and that opens up a lot of doors.
So is this mostly in your local market that you're doing this, or do you do this nationally, or how does this work?
I do it occasionally nationally, but there's so much business in the Texas area. I can get in a car in 3 hours or 4 hours. I can be in Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, and be working that afternoon, shooting that evening situation. But I do, if it's an out of town developer, I just completed a project in Prescott, Arizona last week, and for a major developer in Oregon, and they specialize in the luxury senior citizen communities, and I mean serious luxury communities. And so I will reach out to that West Coast developers and other people in that industry as well, regionally and nationally.
Mm-hmm. And how do you find those names?
Ooh, Google.
Okay.
Healthcare industry, luxury adult senior luxury multifamily developers. And then from there on, it branches out to the architect, the interior designers who specialize in that industry, the construction people who do a lot of categories in the healthcare, hospitality, multifamily industries, and I'll concentrate in those areas. And once again, they will recognize their competitor or another person in that industry,
right?
Whether it be a construction architect or a developer. And once again, well, if that firm was interested in and have used successfully this photographer's services, and I'm interested.
Yeah, and for me personally, LinkedIn is my go-to as far as finding industry specific people, and
yes,
and then being able to find who the decision makers are.
Correct.
I use LinkedIn search for those kinds of things, and especially in putting together maybe a mailing list or things like that. LinkedIn is such a huge resource for that. There's all kinds of little plugins that you can use on your Chrome browser to, scrape the email addresses and things like that for these contacts that you find on LinkedIn. But for industry specific kinds of contacts, that LinkedIn seems to be just a gold mine for me, and worth every penny that I pay for that premium membership.
What plugins are you using?
Lead Leaper is the one that I've used the most. Lead Leaper, LEAD LEAPER. and it looks like it's a little frog icon. And it's a free plugin if you only want to just find single email addresses. If you want to pay, get into their paid program, then it will go ahead and it'll find like 50 at a time for you. You do a search, and once you've got the search returns for that, say, marketing directors of construction firms with more than 100 employees in the United States or in California, say, and then you do that search, and then you start Lead Leaper, and Lead Leaper will scroll through that and create a database of the email addresses that it finds in that search for you.
But you're paying for that premium LinkedIn?
Well, no, Lead Leaper is a subscription, and when you use it in that way, and I think it's $29 or $39 a month to use it that way, and you get, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of search returns that you can do. But that I built my email list with Lead Leaper primarily. I tried some other resources, but that was the easiest one for me.
Right. But you are paying for the premium LinkedIn service.
I am, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also Hunter.
That's a really good one. That
That's
Hunter.io.
That's what I use.
That is excellent.
Yeah.
And that's free.
It has a function that I can, for those who don't know, I have to explain how it works. They have a function I haven't used, which is now you can do a search by industry.
Yeah.
So, but what I use it for primarily is finding email addresses. That's its main purpose. And the primary ways I use it is you just take the URL of the company and you just put it into the machine. It doesn't always deliver all of the emails, but you can sometimes, if there's a standard format, it'll at least give you one of the standard formats. I see less and less standard formats now, which is very frustrating. I intend to write a letter to complain to somebody when I figure out who that is. But it's also got a way to verify. So you can, if you think you know what the email address is, you plug it in and it'll tell you whether it's valid or not. And it's gotten much better. It's much more accurate than it used to be.
It's a really good product.
Yeah.
I use it, just yesterday to verify a couple email addresses for people.
Yeah.
And
How do you get it? Hunter.com or what?
It's hunter.io.
.io.
Oh.
Yeah.
I forget what, I don't know what it is per month. I think I pay $400 or $408 a year.
And I've just been using the free service that it
offers.
So I don't pay anything for it, but I use it to find email addresses. Every once in a while, you'll hear somebody's name and you'll wonder what their email address is at a certain company, who's involved in this, and they give you the name, but you can't contact them. And Hunter is such an easy way to find them and get the email address.
I will say that when Hunter fails, or I can't find it any other way, sometimes on LinkedIn, people simply give you their email address. That's rare, but it does happen. I'll just, I don't use Google, I use DuckDuckGo, which doesn't roll off the tongue, but it works very well. And I'll just put in, Joe Blow email, name of company.
Yeah.
And just keep scrolling. And very often what you see is, there's a lot of companies you can pay that will ostensibly give you that information, but you can see the format, and then you can start plugging that in. You can't see the whole email address. Then you plug that into your guesses into Hunter, and I find that to be very helpful too.
Yeah, I mean, even if you do that search, like you say, with the person's name and email and maybe their company or whatever, what I find generally is that it will pop up in a PDF somewhere online where it's been printed, and then you just then it's verified. Then that's the one. And so
PR people, communications people, who are the people who we are, at least I'm most interested in. Yeah, they'll do RFPs, answers for companies and cities and so forth, and there it is. It's a beautiful thing.
And that's where I find most of the contacts when I'm looking for a marketing director for a construction company, because they've got so much paperwork that gets published. for these proposals. And
Yeah.
so you'll find the person and usually it's the person writing the proposals that's your contact for photography in a construction company. So
I use a very old-fashioned approach for some of this. If there's a client or a prospect that I really, really want, then I'll make the time to call the company and I'll talk to the receptionist, tell them exactly what my interest is, who should I talk to? Okay, the marketing coordinator, but in your company, do you also have someone that handles photography, even, underneath that person? And anyway, I just talked through with the receptionist, the whole setup of their company, and I end up finding the right person. And then when I send an email or call that person, I say, well, I talked to Sue at the front desk and she said that you would be the one I need to talk to about my interest in doing your photography. And anyway, old fashioned, actually pick up the phone and talk to a person.
I think that's
It
really
works.
refreshing. Yeah.
It
Works.
works.
Yeah.
Yes, it works.
I also have to say that I do a lot of cold call emailing. And if I'm not really sure who the right person is for whatever reason, I just start sending it to the architects or even the principals. I mean, not for the giant firms, but for any other firm. And they will write me back and they say, I've referred you to our communications person, and they'll forward it. And there's the email. So now you have the name and you know officially who it is. Because God bless them, they want to be helpful. So you don't have to necessarily only stick with the people that are going to be your direct contacts.
No, that's a really good point, because I've had a lot of projects that have come through and I've been connected to an architect on LinkedIn or something, and he's seen one of my posts, and then he's been a principal architect and said to the marketing director, contact this guy for a project. And so that's how it comes about. It's through the principal architect, which generally we tend not to communicate with them.
I spent lots of years marketing to marketing people, and I think they a lot of times can put a name forth to the principal architect, but a lot of times the principal architect, depending upon the size of the firm, is going to ultimately have the say-so of who they want to have their eyes on the project. Face-to-face is more important than ever. And if somebody is going to have traveled, let's say in my case, from Ohio to Kansas City to Boston to New York for the purposes of meeting with that person, that communicates the value that you put into your desire to have that relationship with them.
I think there's also something that about meeting face to face is that when we often, I think a lot of us get hired by people that we've never met. I mean, every once in a while, you don't even have a Zoom with them. It's all done over email. And the thing that I think a lot of new photographers don't recognize is that when we're on location, we are, as far as everybody else is concerned, we are the company. We're representing the company. There's not really necessarily a difference in the client or the engineer who's, making sure the sprinkler doesn't go on while we're outside. All those people, they don't necessarily see us as freelancers. They see us as a representative of the company. So you really, editorial people understand this, that you are representing the publication when you're out there. So if an editor or a photo buyer or a marketing person or an architect gets to meet you and sees that you don't drool, you know how to speak, you have some people skills, you're polite, all those kinds of things, you act professional, that can go a long way. I look at, I look at other people's websites and look at their posts and so forth. And I see people that are pretty successful and I look at their work and there's nothing really special about it. And I think, well, okay, that's good that they're still getting work, but I think it's such a competitive business that there has to be, or it doesn't have to be, but I think you need every edge you can get. So if you can, do work, because not everybody, I don't know. Anyway, this is an ephemeral statement, right? There's no definitive way to tell whether somebody is even good or not, because there's the basic standards of architectural photography are pretty straightforward. So then what do you do to bring that extra thing that might get somebody's attention or keep their attention so they hire you again?
Well, and nobody's talking about price. There's sometimes price is what keeps people getting that work too, and how they price the project, whether it be cost sharing, all that goes into it, the package. So
Yeah, but I also see, I mean, I have for one reason or another been able to see a major competitor in the Bay Area who's extremely busy, and I was shocked at how much he was charging.
I see less resistance to price than I have ever seen, honestly. And so, maybe I'm opportunistic, but I pushed my rates, and as a result of that. But what I do see is people are really critical about the fact that you show up when you say you're going to do a shoot, and it gets done, and it gets done on time, and it gets done right, and the images look great, and there's this expectation of good work. There's also there's good work, and then there's fabulous work, and most of the work we see is just good work. But the biggest problem I see for photographers starting out is the work just is not good. I mean, they're watching too much YouTube, and they're getting their information from influencers who are not photographers, and what the stuff that they're looking at is not what the industry is all about. And so for the newer photographers, it takes a little bit more effort to find out really what is the good work, and who's doing it, and what does it take to get to that level. And to me, that seems to be the biggest hurdle that I'm seeing, and they are cutting price. I mean,
well, and also I think as a beginning photographer, your portfolio is just simply going to be thinner. And one of the ways you can deal with that is you just go out and do the work anyway.
Well, sure.
I mean, this is Brad mentioned Yvonne Bond. That's kind of what he did in a way. You just go out and, I mean, I know I've forgotten his name, a guy in LA who was young and starting out, and he went out and shot the Calatrava first project in the States was a bridge, a pedestrian bridge in Redding or something like that in Northern California. And he just went out and shot the hell out of it. And he just marketed himself going out shooting for free, for not on assignment. I mean, you're doing exteriors. You don't even need to ask permission. You just show up and do it. And that's a way to build a portfolio. I mean, it's not a long-term business strategy, certainly, but working for free.
To build on what Barry said, that's exactly what I did. I haven't been in the business that long, but I love to go find distinctive architecture and photograph it, and I would do it for free, but I found a way that I can get paid to do it, which is a lot more fun. And I shot all kinds of stuff like that. I have Calatrava pictures in my website, and I have other famous architects and Richard Meier and things like that. Well, I didn't get paid to shoot any of that. I did it for the fun of it and to build up my portfolio, to show that I could do that kind of work.
I think also for young photographers, it's important to know that your clients they know who Calatrava is. They also know who Frank Gehry is, and I think what I'm about to say, there's a kind of limit to this. If you take pictures of famous buildings, if you are taking pictures of studio gang buildings, which tend to be really distinctive, so that people know who that is, it doesn't necessarily matter whether your potential client thinks that you are shooting directly, you're being hired by Gene Gang and the marketing people or not, but they know the building. And so if they see that you can do a nice shot of a famous building, that's helpful. Now, the other side of that is if you're going to go to Los Angeles and take yet another picture of the Disney Hall, that's not going to do you any good, because there are so many pictures of that taken by,
thank you,
tourists. So, pick a building that is distinctive. Anyway, that's I'm just talking about ways to build a portfolio.
I think that's good information, and I will admit that my first portfolio that I took around was 100% non-paid work.
Yeah.
Every single shot in there was a shot that I had done on spec and was not paid for.
Yeah.
But you have to execute it really well to pull that off. It can't just, you can't be just the merits of the subject itself. You really got to pull it off. And so, for me, my book that I first started out with was 100% spec. And
yeah, I had a lot of
nobody
real
knew
estate
that.
photos in mine. I didn't do a lot of real estate, but I was hooked up with a guy who I was very friendly with, who specialized in craftsman homes and older homes in Los Angeles. And I would shoot anything for any amount of money in those years. And so I would just pluck the very best interiors and exteriors and just show those. I mean, it might be one photo out of the 40 that I delivered, because that's the nature of real estate, but it was good enough.
So just to piggyback what Alan said about delivering on time. So I went to Brooks Institute back in the day and graduated in 81. And one of the instructors, final classes in business, he says, and it always stuck with me, if you deliver a good product on time at a fair price, you'll never lose sleep over not having enough work. Now in the Portland market, where I've been my whole career, that's not always the case, but I always felt that was a good way to go, to remember that. And I tell some of my assistants that are just starting out, just to remember that those 3 simple principles: on time, good quality, and a good price. And that's what you were talking about, Alan.
David, to jump off of that, I mean, I teach architectural photography at Columbus College of Art and Design every other year. And one third of their grade is to show up on time. If you are late, you lose a point. If you miss a class, you lose 3 points. There's 17 classes. Okay. I don't care where you are, what job you have. If you've got a client who's there, you're to meet them at 9 o'clock, you show up at 9:10, 9:15, you're not going to have that client anymore.
I'll go farther and say, show up at 8:30, 8:45.
Yeah, because you're going to be lost. You got to find the place.
Well, you're going to get lost, but also those practical considerations, or maybe you weren't able to do a scout, or maybe something has changed. So being able to be in control and keep the temperature down if the architect is late and freaks out. And I find often, and I'm really sorry to say this because I really love most of the people I work for, they're always late. Not always, but they're often late. So then I'll go freelance, which is to say I'll go shoot something they didn't ask me to do. And I'll have an opportunity to do that when I wouldn't have had it before. So then it's that extra bit, but at least it means you're on time, because and I stay as late as the light will allow, even though the architect may have gone home.
Coach here in Jacksonville used to preach all the time that if you're 10 minutes early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late.
This was something that kind of was a big deal when the recession hit for my business, is that I started printing books to send out, and they weren't as fancy as the one that Brad did, but these were smaller format books. But when I would respond to a client for a project, if it was a big enough project, I had these books that I could send them to show my work that they could keep. Well, that's repeat. They keep that on their coffee table in their office, or on their desk, or on their bookshelf, or something like that. They weren't expensive to print. I don't remember offhand who I did them through, but I think I maybe had $15 into each one. But for a $5,000 project, that's not a big investment. And so coming out of the recession, that was a huge factor for me. There were a few projects we picked up, and I know that the difference, because the other photographers they were considering were good, the difference was probably the book that I sent to them, that they could just, they sat with my work for longer than anybody else's. So just wanted to circle back to that.
Well, it doesn't have to be a book. Books are really great. But I show up, I just print a bunch of 11 by 17s and I put them in a decent box.
Yeah.
And I show up with loose prints. They're not in plastic or anything. And there is really nothing like looking at a printed photo, whether it's in a book or a loose print.
Well, and if you really want to confuse a 28-year-old marketing director, show up with transparencies.
Yeah, with your own light box too. You got to
Light bulbs,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then tell them it's a digital print. And then what?
Yeah, this is from my Nikon.
No, I'm being mean.
I have an 18-inch laptop that I just take with me and I show off things. Yeah. And then like if they like a particular kind of pictures, set of pictures, oh, I got lots more of those. Let's go look at this. Because I don't know for sure where they're going to go. And sometimes you think that they just do, let's say, retail, but really they also do offices and they also do something else. And when you're there and somebody asks, well, have you ever done, high-rise office buildings? And so, oh yeah. And then we go to that tab and find that stuff. Where I can possibly take enough printed stuff with me to show when they are taking me all around.
Thanks, Glenn. Let me just jump off here really quickly. And there was one area that I wanted to cover because I've had a few questions about it, and that's about advertising and using paid advertising and Google ads and any kind of pay-per-click kinds of things. I don't do any of it, but I just wanted to kind of open the discussion. Is there anybody that does any kind of, what we would consider traditional advertising for their business?
I mean, besides like Wonderful Machine and Found, or even
I'm talking about, stuff like Google ads and advertising, in other kinds of media that where you actually would have like a display ad or something like that. There's a lot of local construction and architecture magazines out there that I see photographers advertising in. I don't know how much traction they get from that.
I used to pay to be in the local AIA, but really didn't get any traction from that. I pay for Instagram if you want to pay for certain images to be promoted. But as far as advertising, I don't advertise in magazines, but I wanted to mention the great advertising of just being published, having your name there in the article is just made a world of difference when I started out. So getting published, it's all about getting published.
I mean, there is a publication in Cleveland called Properties Magazine who does not pay for the use of photography, but gives quarter-page ad or half-page ad in exchange for the use of the photography. So we've done that.
Let's bring up SMPS because networking is something that I think that we ought to talk about. And SMPS is one of those groups that for some has been an excellent source of networking and an excellent source of then ultimately finding jobs and assignments and things like that. For me personally, it hasn't gone well, but I'm just wondering if anybody else has experiences with SMPS. Brad, you mentioned you're a sponsor, which
I used to do a lot with SMPS, and I still am a member, and I go occasionally, not very much, and part of it is just it's twofold. It's something I said earlier, where I feel like there's a lot of people at SMPS who may play a role in the decision, but aren't the decision makers. Just like they're being hired as an architect because of what they bring, hypothetically, you're being hired as an architectural photographer for what you bring. Yeah. And you're not just to be a monkey to set up a camera and point it in a certain direction. Hopefully you're there because of your skill and what you can lend.
And I think one of the ways to show that skill is, there's a very simple question. What do you want to see in the picture? And it really forces architects who, may have worked on a project for years and they've got this picture in their head they think you're going to be able to replicate, which is a road to disappointment. But anyway, if you kind of force them to be articulate about what they want to see. Is this element important? Do you want more sky? Do you care about this or that? It forces them to be more of a partner and less of a dominant partner.
Well,
Right.
Barry, I'll say two things to that. First off, there's two words that I use to define me, and really photographer's not one of those two words. One's collaborator, because I think it has to be a collaboration.
Yeah.
And second is storyteller, is that you can take a beautiful image, but if it doesn't convey the story that your architect needs it to convey,
Yeah.
it has no value.
Yeah.
And so I'd rather go, like, I want to understand. And this is also something I think we talk about too, not enough in our trade groups. Everybody talks about money or whatever. That always is the consistent conversation, which is important. We all have to make money. That's important. But what at the core of it, what are you trying to do? How are you trying to do it? I want to understand the architecture. I want to understand what we're trying to tell a story about. And then I want the photo shoot to be a meaningful execution of how we tell the story of that project in a meaningful way.
Well, and it's also the way that the architects are thinking about that.
Yeah.
So if you can begin to communicate at that level, I think it makes life a lot easier when you're on site with limited time.
It's one thing that stuck in my mind is asking the question of what's the story that we're trying to tell in these photographs. I mean, to me that informs everything I do in that assignment. If I can get the architect or whoever it is to answer that question and then have that conversation, is, what is the story that we're trying to tell here? Because that informs how we set up the shots and when and who's in them, if anybody, and all those kinds of things. And then what's the end goal here? Is it awards? Is it just documenting this building? If so, I don't really want to do it. But if it's something to present, create some really amazing images, then yeah, I'm on board. So yeah, thank you, Brad. I appreciate that.
Well, and I mean, even when I get things where, we set up a day to do a shoot and the weather doesn't cooperate, and they go, well, we could still do the interiors.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. Do you not realize that impacts the feeling of the space? And we need to convey the feeling of the space. So we need to have a sunny day, whether it's interior, exterior, whatever it's, my background, like I said, my father and grandfather are both architects. I grew up going to job sites. For me, it's all personal, and when I go out there, it's personal, and I take it very personally.
Well, one of the strategies that I use, which is varying degrees of success with architects or whoever, is I start talking about, obviously, I say, well, I'm part of the marketing team. And I say, part of that is what's the editorial level here? So what do photo editors like to see? Now, this is something that we know about or should know about. It's something that there's no reason to expect necessarily an architect or even communications people to understand, that editors or photo buyers, whatever, have certain requirements of what they want. And so it's just another way. There's no magic, because there's a lot of bad editors out there too. So it's not a guarantee that the photo will be good because you're trying to match some imaginary standard. But it does kind of stop the conversation for just a moment and gets people to think about what a good photo is. Now, in order to do that and actually have that conversation in depth, you have to look at magazines and publications online and all. You have to know the history too of what that standard is. So anyway, that's just another strategy of having that conversation with an architect or a communications person. Thanks,
Barry. Well, gentlemen, I think we will wrap up here. This has been a really interesting conversation. It didn't go and end up where I thought it would, but I think what happened is that we got to a lot of really valuable information. And so there are some things in here that I don't think we expected to hear, but I'm glad we did. And so I'll be re-listening to this because this was a really interesting conversation. And thank you for your participation and willingness to share your thoughts and information. And it's a rare thing when a group of photographers get together like this and nobody's fighting. So thank you.
Too early to drink.
Yeah. So we'll meet again. I think we'll probably try to schedule a December meeting, but I'll keep you posted on that through email. And this conversation should be up here in about a week's time. So thanks to all of you. Have a happy Thanksgiving and stay safe.
This has been another episode of A Photographer's Life. If you've enjoyed this program, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. A Photographer's Life is brought to you by the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This episode is copyrighted and may not be used in full or in part without the written permission of the AIAP. Please join us again soon for another inside look at the world of professional architectural photography.